All right, guys, we're going to try and get this meeting started. Welcome to the public session meeting of Wednesday, March the 22nd, 2017. I'd like to welcome everyone tonight. We have no regrets. I believe everyone is here. I'd like to remind you, if you have something that makes, oh, I'm sorry, Trustee Pappen will be joining us by phone. Is she, I don't know how by phone, but we'll find out shortly. I'd like to remind you, if you have something that makes noise, that you could please mute it or turn it off. And I'd like to welcome all those in the audience and all those watching at home. We apologize for starting a little late tonight. I know you were all waiting with bated breath. The Halton District School Board acknowledges and thanks the First Peoples of this territory and other Indigenous peoples for the use of this land in order for us to continue our work today. I would also like to remind everyone we are video voice recorded and that we are being live streamed out to the web. So our first item is approval of the agenda. Do we have any, can I have a motion to approve the agenda tonight? Moved by Trustee L. Harrison, seconded by Trustee Gerbentz. Any discussion on the agenda tonight? Seeing none, all those in favor?
In favor?
Thank you. Oh, she is with us.
Where is she?
Can you vote, Trustee Pappen?
Sorry, in favor?
Okay. End voting. So that passes unanimously. Thank you very much. Our next item is any declarations of possible conflict of interest. Does anyone have any possible conflict of interest tonight? Seeing none, we'll move on to communications to the board. Pardon?
Oh, sorry, go ahead. Yeah.
Okay, so we do have a presentation tonight. We have the operational plan update from Associate Director Bogue, and see your info report 17042, which is included down below on page 31 of your board package. Welcome, Associate Director Bogue, when you're ready.
Thank you, Madam Chair. As Chairman said, this presentation does correspond to Report 17042 in the information section of the report. We're doing this one up front because this is a report on our current operational plan for this year. It follows in information items in the agenda, so it's actually after the action item, which is the operational plan update for next year. So we wanted to do the update prior to talking about next year's plans. The timing was a little bit awkward this year because of a couple of things. We started our operational plan later. It was approved in November, if you recall, so we were a little behind the 8 ball. And with the new timing around bringing operational plan and special ed plan to the board, we've got a compressed time frame. So we'll get that fixed for next year, probably bring you the update in February, and then the new plan for the following year will come in March. So I've got some slides to share. Oh, and there they are. And I'm not really going to do much sharing. We're highlighting specific nuggets from the report. I'd like to kind of move through these fairly quickly, and the superintendents are going to comment briefly on each slide. We'd like to sort of power through this if we can, and then entertain questions about anything that you've heard today or anything from the report afterwards. So with that, we're going to start right off with Superintendent cell meeting. Oh, we don't have a visual though. I'm up. It's just blank. Oh, did I lose my connection?
Yeah, right here. It's kind of like making sure it has power. Sorry.
Superintendent Truffin is a genius at this stuff. Thanks, Cora. Okay, over to you, Superintendent Somini.
Okay, thank you through you, Chair, to the trustees. We have lots of things going on in terms of elementary program, and there's just a few highlights up there, and really those highlights are based on our 3 focus areas in the department, one being professional development, really focused on specific instructional strategies, as well as planning for individual learners and differentiating instruction for them based on their needs. The second big theme is leadership development, so development opportunities for administrators, IPLs, math coaches, and lead math teachers in the schools so that they can work in schools to further develop the capacity of our teacher leaders. And the third theme is family engagement, so lots of opportunities to engage families in helping their students with their mathematics learning. I'll highlight the math symposium that is coming up on May 6th. We also have opportunities going on at individual schools, and in collaboration with our communications department, we're putting together a math series, renewed math strategy series of videos.
And in secondary, as you're aware, our focus has been on closing the gap for students in applied level programming. And most of our work has focused on the applied institutes, which are for the teachers of the various subjects who come in, and their focus has been on relationships and community building in class, special education, assistive technology, assessment, evaluation, experiential learning, and then the sharing of best practice goes to co-plan, co-learn, co-teach, all for the benefit of the students in the classroom when it comes to our own pedagogy and practice, and this has very much been our focus this year.
Our joint work with school programs and student services has been around the renewed math strategy, and with a real specific focus on students with learning disabilities. So we have 19 schools have signed up for this great opportunity in really deepening their learning around planning and programming and the learning for students with learning disabilities in math. So you can see that focus there. And then also these other sessions that we're offering in terms of really understanding learning disabilities and being very precise in our approaches around IEP development and other work in supporting students and tracking their achievement.
Hi, moving into the area of equity and well-being. I have a couple of major initiatives going on at the moment. First one involves 6 schools which are participating in a collaborative inquiry focused on understanding and disrupting racism, and more particularly Islamophobia in our schools. We have a ministry grant which is helping fund some of this work. All 30 teachers have received training in anti-Black racism and anti-Islamophobia. In particular, what those terms mean, how these issues impact students in their classrooms, and how to become aware of their own bias as they design and implement curriculum so that students see their identities reflected in the classroom in positive ways. With respect to the Truth and Reconciliation initiatives, as you can see, we have been in the process of training at all levels of the organization, including teams at each of our schools. Through the blanket exercise, which is a workshop that explores the relationships between Indigenous and non-Indigenous peoples in Canada. This activity uses blankets arranged on the floor to represent land, and participants are invited to step into the roles of First Nations, Inuit, and later Métis people. And we hope at some point to be able to do this activity with our trustees.
We are excited to launch The Shift, which is a weekly blog and podcast. 2 folks are going out to look at classrooms, learning environments, and to record some of the learning that's happening, and to create a contagious network for folks that want to try to improve a product, a process, or an understanding of how school doesn't work for the past 150 years, so let's do something different. We also have launched an Observe Me challenge, so observe me in action as a teacher, and this week we have launched Observe Me as a student. So what's life like as a student as I go from class to class? And so creating a blog on that, including sites of learning, leading, and observations.
So we know from previous work, but also you've seen in our review of our from our spec ed review that we need to do some work on our IEPs. And so this work is already underway, where we're really looking at streamlining our processes and our development and the implementation of those IEPs to be more effective in our service of students. And then, oh, sorry, this next bullet's Lucy's.
So currently, schools and parents are benefiting from the use of an online payment system for school activities, and we have a plan in place to increase the number of funds that are received through the online system.
And moving to our staff section on equity and well-being, we have continued our course through the Canadian Race Relations Foundation that we offer to our administrators and managers. And again, over 50 administrators and managers have gone through this. It's specially developed for school boards and has evolved through a number of iterations over the years. In addition to that, the HR department recruitment staff have been out to Family of Schools meetings to talk about equitable recruitment practices, and as well as how that relates to our specific demographics in Halton, and some tips for eliminating bias during the recruitment process. In addition to that, our senior admin team and instructional program leaders have been participating in an equity learning series sponsored by OISE, and through that we've been able to explore social identity, power, and privilege. And we've had opportunities for self-reflection, conversations with our peers on equity issues. All of that has been facilitated by 2 individuals from OISE. And we've been able to participate in some collaborative inquiry connected to the specific areas of our organization.
I'm going to speak to the community engagement tool. One of the things that we've just completed is a process when hiring a consultant. We've started to work with the consultant. We have a steering committee, and the primary purpose is to look at some of the pieces in our multi-year plan that we don't have data for. We had talked earlier about creating baseline data, and some examples in these areas for students. We're going to ask questions that would look at how well they know themselves as learners, a whole composite of questions around well-being and how students feel well in the areas of social well-being, emotional well-being, physical well-being, cognitive well-being. We also, HR is working with developing a series of questions that give staff an opportunity to reflect on the effectiveness and the responsiveness of the department. In terms of parents and guardians in the community, we had developed some questions which you had also given us some suggestions for in areas that are of interest to trustees specifically. Perceptions of homework was one of the examples, and effective use of technology. So current questions that are facing some of the areas that we are looking at as a system. We're also looking at the community in terms of questions regarding partnerships. We do not have baseline data, but we are looking to increase, and this will help us gather baseline data. So we're really excited about the opportunity to get this data May, June, and then be able to work with it to make improvements as a system.
We are now centrally managing our budget that allocates technology to classrooms, and we have successfully installed 160 technology-enabled classrooms, which includes a short throw projector, a device for the teacher, and 60 document cameras, which roughly works out to 1 document camera for every 3 rooms. And this is our goal, to have 100% of our learning environments technology-enabled at the end of 4 years.
As the board knows, they initiated the Close the Gap directed at the student learning spaces, but in addition to that, the ministry's increased its funding, so we're probably moving into one of the biggest years for physical renovations to schools that we've had for the last several years. So that's combined Close the Gap and the renewal projects that we typically do on an annual basis.
And lastly, as you know, the board approved a respectful workplace policy in January, and we revised some existing procedures and amalgamated them to create a respectful workplace administrative procedure. We have also struck a steering committee comprised of senior admin, some of our unions and federations, the equity team, and human resources department staff, and that team is meeting to develop a plan to roll out the Respectful Workplace Initiative. We believe that will include an employee survey, again, to gather baseline data on the perceptions of our workplace in terms of respect, harassment, and discrimination, and an information campaign to educate our staff on what that means to us, and then training on the Respectful Workplace Initiative for all staff. That is part of the plan, which will roll out beginning this spring and into next year.
And it's back to me. I just want to thank my SO colleagues for the presentation and for the work that they and their departments have done to pull this work together. This is just a small sample of some highlights of the work that we've been engaged in this year. We'd be happy to answer questions. I maybe can help send them to the appropriate superintendent if trustees have questions.
You do have some questions. I'd like to thank every one of you for your parts in the presentation. It's obvious that we are moving forward as a system, and there's some great things happening, and I'll turn over to my colleagues for their comments and questions. Trustee Collard.
Thank you. I think this is directed to Superintendent Salmini regarding the math symposium night on May the 6th. I know that we've done this in the past, and the last time it filled up so quickly and so many people couldn't attend. So I'm wondering if the size of the offering is bigger this year, and if there will be preference to people who had not made it onto the list last year, and how it will be rolled out, how it will be advertised, so that as many people can participate as possible.
Through you, Chair, to Trustee Collard. We have a similar size planned for right now. We haven't opened up the enrollment yet, but the advertising will be going out soon. I know that Superintendent Blackwell has shared with the PIC committee the dates and the advertisement, but I can certainly take that back to the same team to see whether we can track somehow attendance from last year and see whether there's a way to give preference to people that hadn't attended before.
Thank you, Trustee Daniele.
Thank you very much. Thank you for such a comprehensive yet speedy presentation. A lot contained in just 11 slides, and I appreciate that very much. I have questions on 2 of the slides, though. Just very briefly on slide number 6 from Superintendent Newton. The Shift blog and podcast looks really, really amazing. And I just wonder if you could share that link with trustees, because we might want to follow that blog and podcast as well, just for innovation. And if you have shared it already, I apologize. It's got lost in the mass of emails. If you could share it again, I'd really, really appreciate it. And on slide number 5, Superintendent Eatoff, I was really, really glad to hear how well the blanket activity is going over and the plans to share it with trustees. And I'm just wondering if we could get that moving sooner than later. As somebody who has participated in that, I know the impact of it, and I would really rather that ours was done closer to when the system had it done, rather than lagging 8, 9, 10 months behind the system. So if that's a possibility, that would be fantastic. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Trustee Metropolitansky.
Thank you. I'm not sure who to direct this to, but I noticed that for one of the slides, it mentioned that some changes were being made or considered for IEPs. I was wondering if you could elaborate on what those changes are.
Through the chair, we're still in process with that. We're looking very carefully at how well staff understand students and their learning profiles. We're looking at the structure of the IEPs to make sure that the form itself is really helpful for parents and students and staff. We're looking at the language that we're using. We're often finding there's lots of sort of edgy jargon, if you want to say, that isn't necessarily helpful or informative to everyone, and what's written there is actually implemented. So those are all the elements that we're identifying, but we're working with school programs to make sure that it really fits well with the curriculum, right? That the focus is on the student and their learning. So that is still in process. I can't tell you what the actual final product will look like and processes, but that's where we're going with it.
Could I follow up on that? I think it's awesome that you guys are looking at that. I would just ask, is there any way that we could be involved in that? Because I think that as I've gone through the high school system, I've seen, like, for example, I've had teachers or guidance counselors come into my classes at the beginning of the year, pull me out of class and say, I'm going to talk to you about your IEP. But I also know that there's a lot of confusion on the part of students as to what an IEP is. Many of them don't know that they have an IEP, and there are lots of students who who think that they need one because they've talked to other students who have them, but were never assigned one, and think that they should have one because of a learning disability that may have popped up, or a different learning need that may have popped up when they're in grade 11 that didn't exist when they were in grade 9 or in grade 8, for example.
Yeah, I think that we need to hear from students and also parents, and because it's not just written for the teachers, right? They're written for all those audiences. So in this process, we're going to be asking for feedback from all those groups, all those stakeholders, because they're the participants. They should be the participants as well as the recipients of those IEPs.
Thank you.
Thank you. Trustee Oliver.
Thank you, through you, Chair. Thanks, Associate Director Bogue, for this wonderful presentation and the great synopsis of some of the recent initiatives underway. I know we have multi-year plan targets aligned with our multi-year plan, and we've indicated where we want to increase the proportion of students or staff with respect to particular outcomes or participation in an initiative. In your summary, you've indicated that, where a number of schools had taken opportunity to sign up for a particular new initiative. Is there a plan to eventually have all the schools partake? Is that something that is left up to the discretion of the administrator, or is that something that we as the board can promote?
Through you, Madam Chair, to Trustee Oliver, just so that I understand your question correctly, are you asking for, like, are there things that individual schools will take on that not all schools are doing the exact same thing?
So, for instance, the slide on equity, it stated that X number of schools had taken part in a particular initiative.
Yeah, that's a great question. I mean, we offer training opportunities or professional development. Sometimes there are things that we offer to absolutely every school. There may be things that are offered to absolutely every staff member. But most of the time, honestly, it's more on an invitational basis. Often the need in one school is different than a need in a different school, and depending on what their focus is in their school improvement plans, that may dictate where they want to spend their time and energy. So one school may spend more time and energy around staff learning related to mathematics, for example. I mean, most schools are involved in that learning anyway. There are areas around equity that some schools have a big focus on, or there may be some other pieces as well. So it's fairly rare that we will lay something on for all schools, but unless it's around health and safety and some of those kinds of pieces. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, thank you. And actually, thanks for bringing up the school improvement plan, because that's exactly where administration would, I guess, outline their needs and deficits, and that's what would drive what initiatives the staff are involved in, correct?
Yeah, absolutely. When we talk about a multi-year plan or even our board improvement plan, which is specifically around the academic, the student piece, we've got goals right across the system, but we understand that everything in that plan does not relate to every single school, in fact, because each school has its own unique demographics and challenges and areas of success, that sort of thing. So there is the ability to tailor specific learning for specific schools.
Thank you. Trustee Reynolds snuck in under the wire.
Thank you, through the chair. I would just like to ask a little bit more clarification on an item that is new. It says that there's strategies that are bolded are new. And I would like to understand.
Trustee Reynolds, if I may.
Yes.
I think you're referencing the operational plan
Yes.
for next year.
Yes.
So that's going to come back in the action item of the agenda. This was specifically just to cover
What's done,
update from
yes.
this year. Does
Okay,
that make sense?
I thank you for that clarification.
Thank you. And seeing no further speakers, I'd like to thank Associate Director Bogue and all the rest of the superintendents for the operational plan update tonight. It's wonderful to see so many great things happening in our schools, and we look forward to the next part of the presentation further on when we find out what's going on the next year. So, we have no delegations tonight, so we're now moving to the minutes of the regular board meeting from March 1st, 2017. Can I have a mover? Trustee Grabetz, seconded by Trustee L. Harrison. Is there any discussion on the minutes tonight? Trustee Harvey Hope.
Thank you. Just a clarification. Under presentations, it says the chair acknowledged 3 Inspire Award recipients, but there's 4 names. So I think that was because there were 3 awards with 4 recipients, but I just wondered if we could twig that just a little in case anybody starts going back and counting people, whatever. Thank you.
Thank you. Trustee Collard.
Thank you. Under 4.4 Director's Report, I have clarified some of the statements attributed to me with Ms. Gortmaker, and she has agreed to make the change.
Thank you. Vice Chair Graves.
Thank you. Similarly, I have some clarification around one of my comments. And I think I'll just perhaps clarify them with Ms. Gortmaker privately. Yes, I have the wording here. Would you like me to read the wording just so it is again on the record? Just from she asked that it be noted in the minutes. From there, it would read that the intent was for this to be the only move for this group of students before accommodation pressures are alleviated at Bruce Trail Public School, the closest school to students in the Triangle. And I wouldn't presume to make a guess as to when that might be, so I'd suggest leaving that part off. Thanks.
Thank you. So, all those in favor of the minutes for March 1st as amended? And that passes unanimously. Thank you. So now move on to the any business transacted in private session. Did we have any items from private session tonight?
None to bring forward this evening.
Thank you. We're now up to our order paper. Is there any items the trustees would like to comment or question on the order paper? Trustee Harvey Hope.
Thank you. This is more potentially a housekeeping, so I don't need specific answers necessarily right now, but some of these I've noticed for a few weeks, so I'm just going to point them out. M130073, about the board directing the director to develop and implement a consultation plan, et cetera, and I'm wondering whether the spec ed review does that. So that's the question, and I'll leave that one hanging. M140142, it says deferred to February. We're now into March, so maybe we could just update to that to whatever it's supposed to be. The high-risk safety, I think I saw it on the board report. It's coming in April, I believe. But and then I noticed that we're now bolding, and I think it's because of the new requirements. We're not shading anymore, so if I see bolding, it means it is dropping off. Okay. Yeah, that's a comment for later about I can't read charts in black and white that need color. But those are the comments for the order papers. Thanks. No. Thank you. Trustee Oliver.
Thank you. Through you, Chair. I think as time passes and maybe I personally get further into the term and become more familiar with the different motions and reports, I think there may be, or I would like to suggest that perhaps another column be added here that helps to reconcile the motion and the resolution responsibility with an updated motion and report, because when we look at some of the motions from the past and new motions had come along later, sometimes a reconciliation has to happen. And if you look at the previous motion, it doesn't quite make sense given the change that occurred. So one example would be the M130274, and with respect to grade 1 information nights. If we look at that on its own, it makes no sense at this point given the change in programming. And furthermore, I think this leads to another recommendation I have, which is around building a searchable database where we could find motions and reports and look for these by keywords as well, so that we can quickly navigate all the reports, particularly when something is of a prolonged nature or is revisited years later, and we need to kind of piece things together.
Point of order, that's not really part of the order paper, but I'm not disagreeing with your point, but maybe something could come back under, I will, under trustee comments and questions. Okay. But the one item that you referred to, the highlighted area, has actually been great and is coming off. The elementary schools offering grade 1 programming is coming off because it's been completed.
Okay. All right. And question around, if there are things in the resolution that one thinks might belong under a committee, for instance, the French Advisory Committee, how does one make that, kind of make the agenda for that committee?
I believe that's part of the trustee comments and questions again, because it's not actually directly on the item of the order paper. So can you bring it back up at the end of the meeting?
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so seeing no further items on the order paper directly, we will move on to our action items. Oh, we don't have any. So we'll move on to communications to the board. And our first item, which is the student trustee reports. Trustees Tripolansky and Trustee Hajalvi.
Thank you. So the major thing that we want to report on is the updates that we've made to the student trustee election policy. Before that, though, two quick things. The first is that our next student senate meeting is going to be Tuesday, March 28th. That's the upcoming Tuesday. And the second is that another thing that we've been up to is yesterday we did a call. It was a stakeholder consultation for the multi-year plan and the company that the board is working for to develop a survey for the community. So we just gave some student perspectives on that. About the student trustee election, before I get into this, I just want to thank Gail for her help on this. She's been invaluable in the process. We really want to help her, and also trustees Papin and Daniele, they've really helped us with their advice as well. So for this, the first thing is the timeline in terms of how we're going to be communicating to people in the key dates. Tomorrow, we want to do two things. We want to release a letter to students, and in this letter, we would include information about who is eligible to be a candidate, what forms they would have to fill out, what the process is for becoming a candidate, which we'll also explain in a second, and the key dates that they have to be aware of, as well as a form that they'd have to fill out. We hope to have that sent out to students tomorrow and posted on the board website as well as the Senate website and board social media. We also hope to have principals informed tomorrow that they can have up to 3 candidates from their school, and that those candidates will require consent in the form of a signature on the form from the principal to be eligible as a formal candidate. So that's tomorrow. Beyond that, 3 important dates are that the candidates will have to submit their form by Monday, April 10th. That's a week before the candidates meeting, which is for the candidates who have already been submitted their forms can come to this meeting on Monday, April the 17th, and we'll provide them with information about what's going to happen on the day of the election. And the day of the election is Tuesday, April the 25th. So that's our timeline for what we see happening. In terms of what we've actually been working on, so there are a couple of amendments to the policy that we've made. I'll just talk about the most important ones. The first and the biggest one, I think, the most important one, is we're changing the weighting of votes. So in the previous form, or the current form of the policy, actually, the voting for the weights for elementary and secondary students is unequal in that it's weighted 4-to-1, secondary to elementary. So secondary votes are worth more than elementary. We'd like to change that to be equal so that it's an equal voice heard from both elementary and secondary. We think that the voice that an elementary student has and a high school student has are equal and should be heard equally. So we'd like to change that weighting. The second thing is we'd like to specify that there can be up to 3 candidates per school. I believe it's open right now. We just think that it would be a process that's a lot more streamlined if you can ensure that you don't have 10 candidates from one school show up to the election night. The third is one thing that we want to change in the policy is we want to have a statement about advertisement about the fact that you're a candidate not being allowed until you're officially a candidate. So you can only start promoting yourself in your campaign once you've gone through the process of saying, well, I am a candidate, I filled out all the forms. And the last thing is we're just clearing up some of the language about requiring a sign-off from the principal and that you have to fill out this form, get consent from your school before you're officially a candidate.
So the next part is just looking about what the election is actually going to look like this year. So the process is going to involve all the candidates who are official to have about approximately 3 to 5 minute speeches. And then following the speeches, there's going to be a little question and answer session where the audience, we're going to take a maximum, I believe, of 2 questions from the audience and 1 possibly from myself. And this year we're kind of looking at computers to be set up to have the voting process done. So we're going to have a couple Chromebooks, I believe, being set up, and then the students will just go up and put their HDSB emails, and then they can vote through that way. We're kind of moving towards in the future, hopefully having a fully electronic voting system where you can vote regardless of your location throughout Halton. That way, because what we found in, for example, last year we had anyone who wanted to vote had to kind of come down to JW Singleton and hear all the speeches in order to vote. When we're expanding kind of a fully technological kind of voting through technology, it's a lot easier because if someone doesn't have access for transportation, for example, or anything like that, to actually come down and hear the speeches here, they still have the ability to vote that way. So that's what we're kind of moving towards. So in the next session, we're actually going to be bringing up a notice of motion about implementing some of these changes in the upcoming election as well.
Go ahead, Director Miller.
Yes, Associate Director Bogue will be messaging all the school principals tomorrow, I believe, around the student elections and so on. And I just also want to acknowledge the work of Dasha and Zaid on this, and Jamie Sinclair from the IT department as well. But Zaid and Dasha are holy mackerel. I get tired when I work with those two. But they've been great, and this is a great initiative on this, and it's long overdue that we've looked at the process for student trustee election. So thank you, Dasha and Zaid. I know you thanked other people, but the real thanks belongs to you too.
Thank you. There are some comments and questions for you. Trustee Daniele.
Thank you. Great work and great initiative. I really think this is moving us forward. The question that I would have about using the Chromebooks, because I know in the past using the papers, students had to identify what school they were from, with the idea that being then all the votes from that school were collected and that school chose a candidate to keep the schools with 1,300 or 1,400 students from overwhelming the schools with 300 students. And I'm just wondering how you're going to be addressing that.
Of course. So we are talking to Jamie Sinclair about that. So we're hoping right now how we have it is that they input their kind of school as they register through their HDSB emails. But that doesn't really, that kind of involves a student could also, who doesn't go to a certain school, can kind of change their school. And so we're kind of hoping to see if we can automatically detect their school based on their emails. So Jamie's looking into that right now. And once he does, we'll definitely give you guys an update on that.
But we do want to keep that, like we're planning to keep the system of the points per school.
That's good.
Thank you. Trustee L. Harrison.
Thank you. This is a lot of work that you've done, and I wanted to express my gratitude. The students at TA Blakelock are very much excited and looking forward to new opportunities to participate. So I just wondered, for clarification, do you see that remote voting piece happening this year, or you said working towards it? I just wondered if that means this year or in a subsequent year.
So that wouldn't be this year, just because we thought about it, we had discussions about it, but it would take time to test that technology to ensure that it works properly and that all the schools could use it well and that it worked properly. So we'd be looking towards that in the future. So for next year, perhaps, the student trustees next year could look at that. We want to set the ground for that, and that's one of the reasons why we're moving towards having the Chromebooks available for voting, because it's a symbolic and it's a small step, but it's one that gets people thinking about how can we start voting in a way that's more accessible to the broader student population.
Thank you. Trustee Harvey Hope.
Thank you. I'm just wondering, when you're talking about accessibility and getting here, I realize it's usually at night for the Student Senate. Has there been any discussion of perhaps of videotaping the speeches early afternoon, then broadcasting them, and then having like right after school, and then having the geographic locations being at least each high school could have votes? Like, just looking at it from that point of view, rather than, again, trying to get them all here, because I think that probably is why you don't have a high uptake on that, because if they are access to transportation, the traffic alone is a problem to get from east to west or north to south.
Yeah, so we're actually looking, again, like we said, next year to have it completely electronic. So we would be streaming all the speeches, and then people, any student that is viewing the speeches could access a kind of forum where they could vote online from wherever location they have on whatever device they have. So that's kind of what we're gearing towards. But again, just getting that kind of the process and actually planning that and making that an effective way, it does take time. So we're hoping to implement that next year. So for this year, what we're doing, like we said, is just the Chromebooks to kind of ease us into the idea that we're using technology to kind of do the whole voting system.
And I think that's a really great idea. I think it's just we want to ensure that the technology works properly, because when the technology doesn't work, people become upset. And I think that doing something like that would require a lot of coordination among all the schools, and just ensuring that the streaming technology works. So we would want to test that within schools and ensure that they have a time set up next year and to then have that work then.
Go ahead. So if you're going to use Chromebooks and use Wi-Fi here, I presume the reason why you don't want to allow it at other locations in case you have to go back to paper. But the streaming works because we stream it. So I'm just saying is that some of the question marks, some of that technology has already been sorted out. So it would be the coordination of locations more than anything else that probably needs the extra year.
Yeah, for sure. And there was also a component of we want to make sure that students see all of the speeches. So having them here in person means that we can ensure that all of the audience members saw all of the speeches before they voted. Like last year, there were incidents where we couldn't let some people vote because they didn't see all of the speeches. So if we have them all in one location, at least for this year, when we're sure about how the technology works, we can ensure that that is a standardized thing.
Thank you. Trustee Pappen.
Thank you to the chair, to our student trustees. I just wanted to commend you both on all the work you've done on our election process and updating it. And I also wanted to just be clear on how the nomination period will be laid out for future students who want to run for a student trustee.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Michelle. So we're gonna have the form. We're gonna tomorrow. We're sending out a email with the information letter for principals as well as the candidate form for which students have to fill out if they are interested in running for the trustee for the position of student trustee. That has to be submitted by April the 10th, and following that, we're gonna have our election meeting on April 17th after our student senate meeting, and yeah.
Just to be clear about what that entails, so the form has a couple of sections. So there's a section that's like information about yourself, like why are you running, what is your school, what is your grade, and then there's a spot that's like signature from parents, signature from principal. Yeah, that's it.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Trustee Gervais.
Through the chair, I'm absolutely amazed at the amount of work that you guys accomplish, just period, and you're still full-time students. My comment / question is, well, I guess question. I didn't realize that elementary students actually voted for a student trustee. And are you able to get a lot of participation at the elementary level for voting for student trustees? I know that sometimes on the student senate side, you're not getting 100% participation, of course, from the elementary side. So I'm just wondering, how are you doing that?
So actually, if we look at our Senate, what we've seen is there's oftentimes more participation from elementary senators than there are from secondary, which is interesting. There's probably a number of factors from that. Perhaps it's just time and how much time they have to dedicate to it. But I think that from our experience, the elementary kids are really passionate about having their voice heard. They are the next generation in that they're in the system for a longer time. They have more time to go through with it and to experience the changes. So our experience is that they're really, really passionate about it. And last year, from what I remember, there was a really high turnout of elementary students.
Traditionally, our elementary students are exceptional in our student senate. So I remember last year for our elections, the vast majority of them did come out, and they are all very passionate, just like Dasha said, about the elections and just student voice in general. So we do find that they are very valuable, and there is quite a wide turnout for them.
And I think we want to increase the turnout. Perhaps we'll just tell the elementary senators, like, spread it in your schools. Tell your friends to come, because it is probably a bit harder to target those kids than it is to the high school kids who can just drive and bring their friends here.
I would be happy as a trustee to spread the word to my elementary schools as well. So if you send that along to, I'm sure I'm not the only one. If you sent that information, we would do that for you.
Thank you. Trustee Daniele.
Thank you. And I wonder if perhaps when you're sending that information to the principal, CC the trustees on it, so that we can follow up if we need to. So I'm going to switch from election now, if that's okay. I just wanted to give you a heads up and put on your radar that the Ontario Public School Board Association's AGM is coming up in June, and that one of the member boards of Central West Region is going to be putting forward a motion requesting the student voice at the Oxford table and creating a student trustee position on there. So, and I know that that is something that Trustee Collard will be going to the AGM for. So she and I will be seeking your input on that between now and June, if that's all right.
Thank you. Trustee Collard.
Yes, I'm actually working with the Hamilton trustee on that motion. So yeah, I'm looking forward to it, and hopefully it will go through without a hitch.
Thank you. I'd like to commend both Trustee Tripolansky and Trustee Hajali on all the hard work you've put into this, because I've seen many different iterations of the trustee nomination and voting process, and some have worked okay. and I know you're going to get it working well. So thank you for all the hard work that you and everyone else involved, and it'll be very exciting to see how the process goes. All right, so we're now up to, no, because they're going to make a notice of motion now, and then I will. So we're now up to our information items, including notices of motion. Do we have any notices of motion tonight? Doesn't want to see you? Oh, Trustee Hajali.
Perfect. Thank you so much. So for this upcoming election, we want to kind of implement an equal weighting system for both elementary schools and secondary schools. As this isn't a kind of a part of our existing student trustee policy right now, we think for sure, Dasha mentioned this before in her report, that elementary and secondary students are both valued equally in their opinions, and that their kind of say should be valued equally as well. So throughout this voting process, we're hoping that we can kind of equalize their voting standpoint.
And we'd be ready to bring a report and a motion forward for the next board meeting, which is the 5th of April, I believe.
Thank you. And there will be an expectation, so trustees are aware, to waive the rules for these exceptions on that date. So when you receive the report, please be aware. So because we need to have it done in time for the student elections. Okay, it will be a request, but it would work very well because the student elections will be coming up before the next time it would come. Trustee Collard.
My only concern is that because this is a policy, we normally would post for 25 days. So we will be really, really waiving the rules if we're not posting the proposed changes for the 25-day period. I don't have a problem with it, but we're waiving more than just the timeline rules. We're also waiving the posting rules.
Yeah, an exception to policy. Trustee Harvey Hope.
Based on that requirement, could it possibly be that you circulate it to your student councils once you've drafted it, circulate it and get them to, they may have a meeting between when you have it done and when we have the vote the first time, and perhaps they could just get a kind of a, straw vote or whatever the comment is, like, did anybody kind of go, because it would be the secondary students that are giving up the advantage. The elementary students aren't going to say no to having an equal vote. So the high school student councils are a little more organized, and maybe just to see if there's any reaction from the student population in general, because we aren't going to have time to ask that question unless you've already got the information when we ask.
Thank you. All right, well, we'll look forward to your report for the next meeting. So thank you very much. And your next meeting is next Tuesday, is that correct, here? And it's the same day as the skills competition, correct? Yeah. All right, our next item is our action items for April the 5th. The first item up is the operational plan, Associate Director Bo, report 17038, which is for action in June on page 13 of your board package. And this is a continuation of the information from the previous presentation. Welcome again, Associate Director Bo.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So this is the proposed operational plan for next year. As you heard some of the highlights from our plan for this year. The plan this year, or the operational plan this year, was approved in November the 16th. So what you heard was a little snapshot of only about 5 months worth of work. And so one of the things that you'll see in next year's proposed plan is that there's not a ton of changes. We're into the process of implementing the strategies that we laid out this year, and there's still some ongoing assessment of those strategies. So the changes in the operational plan, you'll notice that were used, or that are indicated in the report, are strike through if it's a strategy that we had in place that we're no longer suggesting be in the plan, and bold if it's a new strategy. So I'm happy to answer any questions, and I'll look to my colleagues as well, depending on which questions that trustees may have.
Thank you. Is there any comments or questions regarding the operational plan for 20? No one wants to talk. Trustee Oliver.
Thank you, Chair. Through you to Associate Director Bogue. And I feel kind of validated in asking this question because it's not just my personal and my family experience, but it was also brought to this table by our student trustees as part of the feedback that they were bringing from the Student Senate. And that relates to the discussion and recommendations around possibly having, ensuring that a student does not have the same teacher for a prolonged period of time. And where I'm heading with this is, as we're looking at, our plans for various initiatives and considering student achievement and engagement, I think it's important to consider the right fit of a student and a teacher as much as possible. Also, explore the opportunities for having more specialist teachers engaged in teaching in the primary and intermediate grades, so that we're not having generalists teach for a prolonged period of time, but we're actually having, let's say, math-trained teachers teaching math and starting that earlier as opposed to later. So I know this is kind of, coming at you unprepared. So
But it's something that I've been kind of mulling over. And, I come from the European education system where I've spent five years. And we certainly had specialists teach history, geography, math in the primary and intermediate grades. So, that's just something that I've been thinking about. And I would like to invite staff to consider and look at the opportunities for that in our schools.
Through you, Madam Chair, to Trustee Oliver, thanks for that question. And it gives me an opportunity to thank the student trustees again. They brought 3 issues to us, and we had some opportunity to talk about those. This particular issue is a really complex one. I'm going to look over to Superintendent Salmini. Depending on the age and stage of the kids, whether there's pros and cons to having a core teacher for much of the day versus Rotary and those kinds of things. So we did talk a little bit about this issue, and maybe Superintendent Salmini can elaborate a little bit further.
Through you to the chair to Trustee Oliver. There are different schools of thoughts, but with elementary students in particular and young students, we really look at teaching the whole child. So we look to our educators to be teaching the child first and obviously the subject second. And if there are too many changes for students at the early years in terms of having a teacher for every subject, they lose in terms of that ownership of that child and that community and that sense of a person in school. Now, certainly, when we talk about intermediate students, that looks a little bit different because they are older and ready to have multiple teachers. Again, we wouldn't want them to have a different teacher for every single subject like in secondary because they're still at a developmental stage where there's rapid change in adolescence and a great time of change, and having someone that they feel is their solid homeroom teacher is an important piece for our adolescent students as well. In terms of qualifications of our teachers, before I pass it over to Deborah, I would want to mention that we do a whole lot of professional development in-house for our teachers who are generalists. So in terms of math qualifications, we're doing lots of professional development with all of our teachers at all stages to make sure that they are comfortable in teaching the discipline of mathematics or whatever else it is. And I'll pass you over to Deborah.
Thank you. Because the qualifications for elementary teachers are structured differently than those for secondary, our elementary panel teachers are qualified in either primary, junior, or intermediate. While there are some specialist AQs, such as the math additional qualification that's offered, it's not a requirement that teachers have that qualification by the ministry in order to teach math. So I hate to bring the specter of Regulation 274 to the fore, but it tells us that we must hire teachers who are qualified, and by that it means qualified under Regulation 298 of the Education Act, which means if you have the basic qualification of primary, you're qualified to teach anything in grade 1, 2, or 3, and therefore we must hire you. So we are a little bit constrained by that regulation and our ability to hire individuals with those specialist qualifications. But again, there aren't many specialist qualifications in elementary as there are in the secondary panel.
Thank you. Trustee Reynolds.
Thank you, through the chair. My question is regarding the creative opportunities and partnerships section. I noticed that there was a new item with respect to inviting partnerships through local facility projects and new construction, and that the Halton District School Board will experience a 5% increase in our formal community partnerships. My question is, first of all, is that 5% increase, is that based on each municipality, or is that net overall for the Halton District School Board? And if you could perhaps elaborate on what that looks like with respect to the local facility projects that you're looking at, and perhaps the new construction, and which municipalities these would fall under.
Maybe I can start, and Superintendent Cullen can speak maybe specifically around some of the facility pieces. The 5% target that we set was really around formal community partnerships across the board. Right now, we're in the process of really looking at what formal partnerships do we have. We have partnerships that are truly formalized partnerships, and then some that may be less formal, or some that may be more school-based, that sort of thing. So we're in the process of really doing a bit of an audit And Superintendent Pennyfather is taking on this work for us to understand where we are now and get a picture of our baseline. Following that, we're looking at increasing partnerships, so we've got some strategies in place around that in a more general sense. But our target, we weren't sure, if you remember when we had this conversation in the fall around how lofty of a target to set, but we thought 5% was a reasonable first step, and that's sort of a board-wide target. Maybe I can look over to Superintendent Cullen around the facility pieces.
And again, I would have to echo some of those comments that most of our targets are system-wide, so we don't target municipality, I would say, any different one over the other. The other issue relates to a benchmark to try and look at how are we going to measure any form of improvement, what mechanism or tool do we use? And one of the first steps we have to get into is actually establishing a baseline and a measuring mechanism to do that. So that'd be the first steps in the upcoming process.
Thank you. And seeing no further speakers, I'd like to thank you very much for your report tonight. Looks like there's going to be lots of great things happen. So our next, and that will be coming back in June for us. Next item is the school year calendar. I see Associate Director Bogus just stayed there. Report 17039 on page 20 of your board package. When you're ready.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Through you to trustees, you've got our proposed calendar for the next school year in front of you. I want to thank Trustee Grabentz for her contributions on the committee. We had a calendar committee that looked at dates. Primarily, the calendar committee is really looking at the PA dates because much of the other dates, the holidays and the March break and Christmas break, are generally pretty well set. You'll find in the calendar that it's very similar to this year's calendar with a couple of adjustments. One is that this year we had a PA day just before the March break, and next year we've placed that PA day just prior to the Family Day weekend. And we tend to, as you know, attach our PA days to weekends wherever possible. The one area that, and the calendar committee was pretty well in agreement on all the PA date locations with the exception of September. There was some conversation around where that September date should be. The committee really was hedging towards the first day after Labor Day. They thought starting the school year like we did this year was a good thing. And for some reasons, it is a good thing. It's a nice way to frame the beginning of the year. We also took a bit of flack from the community around why have a PA day when it's the first day, we're expecting our kids back in school. And so we talked a little bit about that. We considered if starting the school year with a PA day is a good thing, why don't we do September the 1st? And that's the Friday before Labor Day. And that was not a date that the folks on the calendar committee were that happy about. So we looked again later in September, thinking we'd start off the school year, get staff and kids settled, and then have the PA day still close to the beginning of the year so that learning is happening early and can carry on and be used throughout the year. And where we landed was we originally were thinking September 22nd, which is Rosh Hashanah, and we have several staff that take that day as a religious day. So we landed with September 25th. And so that was the one date that I would say we didn't have full agreement at the committee level. Where we land right now with the calendar, proposed calendar, is identical to the Catholic board. That's really important around transportation. And last night, it's my understanding, I just checked their board agenda, that it did go to their board last night as well, coming back in 2 weeks. And if all the stars align, then we'll do some kind of joint communication to our communities after the calendar is approved by the board. So I'm happy to answer any questions that trustees might have.
Thank you. Trustee Harvey-Hill.
Thank you. Through you, Madam Chair, to Associate Director Bogue. This is always fun trying to figure out the dates and where to put them. And I sat on the committee one year and I remember the conversation about, well, what ifs. One of the things that I find every year with this particular proposed school year calendar, and occasionally we've had it and occasionally haven't, is the emphasis on the school day holidays being in the information. And when I read the winter break dates, I immediately have to go look at a calendar to see what that actually means. And so I'm wondering, and I know I've said this at one point, and I seem to recall I got a, yeah, we should do that, but we keep slipping back. Actually saying when school starts and what the last day of school before Christmas break is, the holiday break is, because when you say the winter break goes from December 25th and all of a sudden you're like, well, yeah, but does that mean school goes to the 24th? No, the school only goes to the 22nd. And so when you say the last day of school is the 22nd, it's like, oh, okay, got time to get to grandma's or wherever. And then when you say it only goes to the 5th, yes, but you still got Saturday and Sunday to fly home. And so I know it seems like maybe spoon feeding, but if we could put down, you know, last day of school in December is this, and the first day back is X. Because the same thing happens with, and we had this conversation last year, semester 2 starts the day before the students start. So it's a, when does the semester officially start and when do the students actually come because of the PD days. So again, when you're, this piece of paper is what gets posted on everybody's fridges or what they take. So if we could have like even 1 or 2 extra lines that just, so it's really clear, you know, what day you're back or what day you're leaving.
We can include that.
David?
Thank you.
Through your chair, Amos, to Trustee Harvey Hope, you did indeed say that last year, and we did indeed say we'd do it. And we'll get this sorted for this one. I'm glad you reminded us. So, I think you said it 2 years ago as well when I was associate director.
I've said it a few years. The other piece is the professional activity days. If you're adding a few more characters, could we put Friday, October the 6th, and Monday, September 25th, again, so that it's very clear, or a star beside the September 25th one, so that it's really clear that that's a Monday, because that is very unusual in that I don't recall having a Monday one in the time my students have been in, 16 years. I don't remember ever having a Monday. So that will be a very unusual event. But I thank you.
Thanks for that, Trustee Harvey Hope. Yeah, we did talk about the Monday. That'll be a change for our community a little bit. It's still attached to a weekend, which I think people will appreciate, but it will be a change. So we can add those dates in, and we really will do it this time with the other suggestions that you gave us. Thank you.
Thank you. Vice Chair Graves.
Thank you, through you, Chair, to Associate Director Bogue. I would have thought that putting a PA day on a day that includes something like Rosh Hashanah would make sense from a student perspective, because you have a group of students who are going to be taking that day off anyway, and this way they're not missing any school, and staff still can take a PA day off for religious reasons. Was there any consideration given to that? I'm just surprised that it was purposely moved so as to miss that date, when I would have thought the opposite would have been preferable.
Yeah, we talked about it both from the staff angle and the student angle. We wondered if you're a 12-year-old student, whether you'd want to be off on a PA day when that's your religious holiday. Maybe for kids, they may actually prefer to be off on a school day. But, I don't know if you ask a younger student. But, yeah, we did weigh the pros and cons of that, and we felt if, in our learning agenda, if we've got some staff that we're leaving behind, that was the consideration, I would say.
Thank you. Trustee Givens.
Thank you. Through you, Chair Amos. It was very interesting to be on the calendar committee. It's a short stint, but again, very interesting. And I have a comment and a question. First is, I think a lot of our problem last year with regards to having the PA day the day after Labor Day is we didn't catch the attention of our communities, and so we caught a few of them off guard, I think, and so they didn't realize that they had another day with their children and they may have had to work or whatever. I heard a lot of I heard a lot both ways. So I'm hoping we're really communicating this well this year, especially with the Monday, because again, that could catch people off. Good communication plan. And the other thing is, do we specifically send out this calendar to the region, to the municipalities, even to, any clubs or whatever? Is there some sort of mailing list that we have? Because a lot of those organizations kind of pick up the slack for parents on those PA days with camps and all sorts of things. So if we can give them a heads up as soon as possible, then they can organize their years and people can, it's all about communication, expectation, and moving forward.
Thanks for that, Trustee Gribbants. I don't believe we put this out to mail it out. We post it. When we went back and reviewed our communication plan last year, it was amazing how many times we actually had sent something home or how often it went in a newsletter. So we got to work on that. We recognize that we may need to have it out there 10 times. I'm just looking over at Superintendent Etoff. I don't believe we send the calendar out to community groups specifically. Do you have a sense?
I can verify that, but my experience is that later on in the school year, once the calendar is approved, that we instruct schools to send it out. So we don't send it out centrally, but that we do ask our schools to send it out as part of their year-end communications via newsletter, report cards, and I would have to check whether we have provided print resources or whether those have gone by the wayside in the last year or so.
Thank you. Trustee, go ahead.
Well, I was just wondering, in the light of sort of community partnership, that we could maybe have build a mailing list for those that may actually want this kind of information that are outside of our system.
Or we have a media release and they pick it up. Trustee Pappen.
Thank you. Through the chair to Associate Director Bogue. Thank you very much for this report. I know the last two trustees that have sat on this committee have spoken very highly about being on the committee, so I think at some point I'd like to be on this committee. But my comment and question are around the professional activity day that will fall before the Family Day long weekend. And I know from reading about the Family Day and how it originated, that was sort of placed in order to give people a break between Christmas and Easter, which could be sometimes up to 3 months apart. So this would be a great long weekend for our school community. But I'm wondering about the PA day that you're taking away from the March break. How long have we had a PA day the Friday before the March break, and what are we going to do to communicate this to our schools and our families so that they're not caught off guard with not having that extra day at the March break?
Thanks for that, Trustee Pappen. I'm looking around the room. I think this was our first year. I mean, not ever, but the first year in a number of years, and I think it was the result of the additional. We used to have 2 mandated PA days, and boards were allowed to have 4 additional for a total of 6. And last year, if you recall, as a result of some provincial bargaining, boards then got the additional day, and I think that's where we landed last year. So I can't remember. It's been years, I think, since we had it attached to the March break.
Okay.
That's my recollection.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. And seeing no further speakers, we'll look forward to this report coming back the next board meeting. So our next item is the Special Education Plan. Superintendent Zonnefield, Report 17037, also for action in June on page 24 of your board package. Welcome, Superintendent Sonnenfeld.
Thank you. Through the chair of trustees, before you for this report, this is the one you've seen previous years. For this year, there were very few changes to the plan, really just some if we're going to call them housekeeping updates, that because we did such an extensive review last year. So really what's significant this year is our process, because we brought this to you in the past in June, and you know that from our new admin procedure on board admin procedures and reports coming to you, that our new plan is that this comes first to you in March, and so that trustees are well aware of the plan and any changes, and then this would be updated as needed through the budget process with a final document coming to you again in June. So that's how this is different this year. This was brought to SEAC, as you can see, I believe it says in February, and was supported there as well, and with their understanding also around this revised process. So I'd be happy to take any questions.
Thank you. And I guess it's very self-explanatory because there are no questions. Oh, Trustee Harvey Hope.
Thanks. I just had one. Standard 6, number 33. I understand that there is a glossary in the actual spec ed plan, but I don't, and I know an awful lot of them, but I don't know what RHRA Act is. So, meaning of diagnose under the RHRA Act. I'm guessing it's some actual official act. I was kind of curious.
I'm drawing a blank.
So that means it's not one of the top registered health.
Thank you. Yes.
No,
Yeah.
it can't be retirement homes. Anyway, so I'm just suggesting that if you're going to do a little quick summary of the things that are going to be changed, and you spell out applied behavioral and for the ABA, one that isn't on the standard edu talk speak might be another suggestion to write it.
Sure. Thank you.
Thank you. And seeing no further speakers to this, we'll look forward to it coming back in 2 weeks. Thank you very much, Superintendent Sonnenfeld. So our next item is the Audit Committee report. Trustee Gray, report 17044 on page 27 of your board package. Trustee Gray.
Thank you very much, through the chair. Tonight, this report identifies the recommendations approved at the February 28, 2017 Audit Committee meeting. The first of the two recommendations concerns the review of the performance of the current external auditor, Deloitte, and the Audit Committee's recommendation to have Deloitte perform the annual financial statement audit for the 2016 to 2017 fiscal year. This represents the 5th year of a 5-year contract with Deloitte. This recommendation will return to the board for consideration on April 5th. The second is a recommendation regarding a new draft policy, audit and non-audit services. However, after a closer look tonight, it is our intention to take the draft policy back to the Audit Committee for further review and revision before bringing it back as part of the board's policy development and review process. Therefore, the revised report that will appear in the next board agenda package will not include this recommendation or the draft policy.
Thank you. Trustee Graves.
Through you, Chair, to Trustee Gray, could you just explain why, for that last piece, why it's going back to audit and not being dealt with as a matter of course?
Happy to do so, through the chair. Coming to my attention tonight, and after discussion with Trustee Harvey Hope and Ms. Gortmaker and also Superintendent Veerman, there were a few sections of the report as it stands right now that would require clarity and possibly would change the intent of what the audit committee agreed to. And so we felt it wise to take it back for those somewhat housekeeping corrections, but some that could in fact imply intent. So we feel it just is a good process to do so.
Thank you very much. Any other comments or questions about the audit report? Seeing none, we will see it come back in 2 weeks. Thank you very much, Trustee Gray. So our next item is information items for tonight. The first being the operational plan update for 2016. Associate Director Bowe, report 17042, which was tied into the presentation on page 31 of your board package. No? It's in 2 places. Wasn't that interesting? No? Is that right?
I think, Madam Chair, it was there because it's a report, but we've kind of covered. I'm happy to respond to any further questions if trustees have them, but.
No, it was good. Thank you. No, I don't mean that. I said, I believe there was a lot of questions already answered, and so thank you for that, and to everybody else who participated.
I wanted to go back up and do some more work.
Okay, so now we're on to our special education review. Superintendent Sonnenfeld, report 17043 on page 35 of your board package. Welcome back, Superintendent Sonnenfeld.
Thank you. So this is a brief report that you see before you. The reports, the findings, I guess we'll call them, from the review. The 4 reports came to Committee of the Whole last week. Last week, I think, or the week before. Anyway, yeah. And we thought that these findings should be brought to you officially to be received by trustees at the board table. So that's why these are here tonight. And you heard from me that we're looking at these in detail as staff. The steering committee that's been supporting this review has received these, and then we'll have time to work through and consider some recommendations. I would think a lot around next steps at their meeting next week. SEAC has received these findings as well, and that will be a large part of their next committee meeting, SEAC meeting. And so we're not at the point of bringing you recommendations, but this is more about trustees of formally receiving these findings at this point. So and we'll have recommendations coming to you at a future date. I'd be happy to take any questions.
Thank you very much for your report. Trustee Collard.
Yes, thank you very much. I've now had this report in 3 different meeting settings, one at SEAC, one at Committee of the Whole, and now here this evening. And giving trustees the opportunity to see the report several times, I found that it sank in a little bit more each time, and I was able to read more into the findings and into the differences between different exceptionalities, as well as some really key areas where I believe you will be going in your recommendations. And so I welcome this report. I think it's very well written, and I'm looking forward to the discussions that are to come. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Trustee L. Harrison.
Thank you. Through you, Madam Chair. Thank you again for this report and all of the information contained in it. My question is with respect to that non-identified IEP group, which seems to have grown and continue to grow. So I was wondering whether additional work will be done to understand the impacts and implications of this group, and whether you know if the choice of non-identification in any way affects the resources that we receive for special education.
Thank you. Through the chair to Trustee L. Harrison. This group of students. I think you heard me emphasize before that the choice of parents to identify their child or not does not impact the services that are provided. So those students still get those services, whether they be accommodations or modifications or other kinds of supports. Those are still available to those students. And from a funding standpoint, we're still funded based on students, because you've heard that the funding formula isn't generated by the students in the different exceptionalities, but by a number of factors, some of which is the number of students with IEPs. So our funding is not affected by those parent choices to identify or not. So from a service to student standpoint, there's not a detriment to that choice, and from a funding standpoint, there isn't a detriment. The challenge for us as a large system is that of these 10,000 plus students with IEPs, more than half of them have chosen not to be identified, and so it makes that group a bit of an unknown for us, a bit gray in terms of the profile and the makeup of that large group. So I anticipate one of the recommendations that will come from this review is that we need to dig deeper in terms of who are those students who are not identified, and that would, I think, getting to know who that group as a whole will help us better plan as a system and make decisions around resource allocations, programming, etc. So I hope that answers your question.
Thank you. Trustee Harvey-Hope. Thank you. I too appreciate seeing the information, because the way it was provided to us at the committee of the whole was much different than, to be honest, trying to read a black and white report where I needed the color graphs. So that's, again, one of those situations where it looks really good online and electronic, but when you actually were to read it in black and white, the shading and all the old school ways of differentiating graphs doesn't work. But that being said, the summaries alone were very useful. One of the things on page 7 of the report, which I'm not sure, it's the student tell them from me about anxiety, quite concerned me. The 30% of HDSB students with an IEP and 22 without being so much higher than the national average. And so I again, would just hope that somewhere along the way that particular topic gets poked a little more. And also wondering whether or not maybe we need a non-identified mental health category. And there's not a label, but there's a category of accommodations that maybe one could start subdividing in those IEPs, because perhaps that will, because that's something you may have and then you may not have it later, but right now if you need accommodations for that, that would give us a better idea of the ones that are actually acknowledging their anxiety versus the rest of the population that may actually also have it, and that might give us a better understanding of if we're making any progress on that topic.
Through the chair, great questions and suggestions. Thank you. Certainly one of the things that will come from this will be further questions, right? Further areas of study, and you've touched on some of those that I'm sure we'll dig into. There will be many others that I know have already been churning for us of where to learn more about our students and how best to support them.
Just to further explain my comments, I actually got a phone call from one of the universities that phones me every year for a donation, that they are requesting donations for mental health supports. So this is not just an elementary, secondary thing, that everybody seems to be dealing with this as a pressing issue. And that's the first time in, well, I'll say how long I've been, a long time, over 30 years, that they've actually requested support for that particular topic. It's usually bricks and mortar. So I was taken aback by that, and so wondering, getting the data to find out how best to solve those problems from a societal point of view as well.
Thank you. Trustee Gray.
Thank you very much, through the chair. Thank you very much for this report tonight. I'm always curious about the funding, and I know that you've just explained to Trustee Al Harrison about the funding and how it's not really impacted, but I wonder, when the Ministry of Education draws data from school boards to inform its funding decisions, does it draw data that includes the board forwarding the number of students without IEPs but receiving support? So would that be part of the data that school boards share with the ministry? Given that it's unofficial in that they do not have an IEP, is the ministry collecting that data?
Through the chair to Trustee Gray, so to make sure I'm clear on you're referring to students who we support without an IEP. So in this report, you have I guess the two big groups of students we're talking about is that all of these students have IEPs. Less than half are identified, have an identification, and more than half don't identify, but all of them have an IEP, right? Just so that. So are you talking about a third group outside of this, or you?
No, excuse me. I stand corrected. I think what I meant to say is those who have IEPs but are not identified.
Right. So the ministry has not been collecting data from us on that group. So the ministry is well aware, because we have the provincial data that shows that the trend that has been referred to and you see over time is not just a Halton trend, right? That is occurring over time and varies by board, but we're sort of right in the middle in terms of an average of that happening. So it's a discussion point for sure with the ministry. I've had those conversations with their staff. They need to dig into that deeper as well. So I wasn't sure if where you were going to go with this is it was around other data that the ministry gathers that does inform their funding. And that's right now based on the long form census, which hasn't been done since 2006. So, and I think that's starting again next year. Is that right? So we hope that through that, but you know that takes about another year after that they'll be better informed about our most current data in Halton. So there is certainly a lag in terms of the information they're using to inform their funding decisions.
Thank you. So Superintendent Zonneveld, what are the next steps? Because I believe that this is not the end of the process. And while we've got some really good information here, can you tell me what's going to happen next?
Sure. So back to the chair. So next we've shared this with staff, with SEAC, and on 2 occasions now with trustees. And next, that steering committee that has been working through this will start to talk about next steps next week. Staff are in that process as well. We've met a couple times and we'll continue to work through this. And in our development around next steps, we'll be sharing that also with SEAC to get their input on that thinking, and then come back here with what that might look like. I don't think I'm premature in saying that some of the information here can help inform some actions right away. There are some things that we're looking at as staff that we could say, there are some process things that we can begin to look at as a board, as a student services department. So some of those things we're not going to wait, we're going to move on. There are some other aspects of this where we need more information. We need to dig deeper. And so I think we're going to come back with some recommendations of where we're going to go next in terms of our digging and our learning. Some of that may include some further formalized study, and if that requires some support within our system or maybe without, we'll come back with what that might look like, possibly a stage 2, I think we've hinted at in the past. So if that's the case, we'll come back with that as well.
That all sounds really exciting, but I guess I'm going to ask more directly. I believe there's still some funds left, so those funds are going to go towards, and then I believe there may be a motion coming back to request to continue the process. Is that not correct?
Probably. I guess my conversations with staff and with the consultants that are our reviewers that have helped us with this work, we've been deliberating a little bit about who best to do this next round of the work. Do we need external support, in which we would need budget? And we do have some funds from this amount that was set aside, or is it internal work? So that we're still in discussion about that. If that happens, then the funds are there because we want to keep the momentum going and move quickly and not have to wait until next fall. So I'm hoping we'll have some clarity on that maybe next week after our steering committee meets. And if that's the case, then we'll come back here with a motion to carry on with that.
Thank you for the clarification. I do believe that trustees would support continuing looking and with doing the review, and we know that staff don't have that much time, and it may be more beneficial to have an external organization continue with the process. And I know that there is some intent to continue that over the summer from the dollars that were existing. Is that not correct?
Yes, for sure. And so that would be, once again, about who best to do the work. Because some of this really is dependent on our own internal processes and knowledge. To be clear, our staff participated a lot in this review and help contribute a lot of the information to help inform it. So that's going to continue, I think, regardless of what this looks like. Dr. Love and Dr. Favreau, I think did great work. Whether or not they're the best professionals to move ahead with the next step, those are considerations we're having, discussions with them. It's also about their availability, because I know they're quite busy with lots of different projects and teaching. So I guess if I could be more definitive for you, I would be right now, but it's all in discussion.
The director would like to.
Through Chair Amos to trustees and Superintendent Sonnenfeld, I'm not sure you would require a motion. The trustees had allocated a particular amount of motion for special education review. There's still money available from that. I think we'll check. Manager of Director's Office, Dale Gortmaker, and I will go back and check the thing, but I don't believe you'll need a motion to carry on with this work with the review, spending the money however it's deemed that it should be through your steering committee. And if it's deemed that we need to carry this on next year, we would put something in the budget to carry this on for the following year, depending on what the steering committee recommends and the people that Superintendent Zonnefeld's working for. So we'll check about whether a motion is necessary or do we just carry on. I think we just carry on, but
I would believe the money was already allocated, so if there's still money in the budget, that should continue. If you want to continue a process that requires more money through the budget process, then that would be a motion.
I think we've only spent about 50 of the 100,000. So thank you.
Okay. Well, thank you very much for your report, and we'll look forward to hearing what else the steering committee has to say about this and the staff. Thank you. Our next item is the Portable Inspection Annual Report. Superintendent Cullen, Report 17040 on page 90 of your board package.
Thank you, Chair Amos. And this is the annual report, because we now only bring this one time to the board, summarizing all of the inspections that we do. We're now doing 4 per year on the portables. We're doing roughly 340 portables across the system on an annual basis, roughly 2 months during the school year. And in this particular summary of last year's inspection, we had only 1 incident of observed moisture, so it's picked up before it becomes mold, and that's a good thing. That's part of the process. I'm happy to take any questions related to the annual report.
Thank you very much. Is there anyone who has any questions around the inspections of our portable classrooms? Well, seeing none, thank you very much for your report, and it's good news that we didn't have any mold. So our next item is the board report update. Director Miller, report 17041 on page 92 of your board package. Director Miller.
Thank you, Chair Amos. 5 of those updates were actually done this evening, and that's the salary disclosure, portables, etc. The next one is supervision of students / safety risks will be coming at the April 19th? April 19th board meeting. And there may be another revision. There may be another revision later on that I'll comment on in the director's report. I was just looking for it here, sorry. So for now, we'll just leave it that way.
Thank you. Any comments or questions about the board report update? Seeing none, we'll move on to the administrative procedure update. Director Miller.
Thank you, Chair Amos. There are 2 APs, I think. This one's on?
Oh, sorry.
Appropriate. Yeah. Oh, sorry. There's just one attached. I'm going to refer to Superintendent Pennyfather to talk about the administration of prescribed meds.
Thanks, through the chair. The administration of prescribed and emergency medication needed some alteration for 2 reasons. The current administrative procedure did not allow for the administration of injections or suppositories during an emergency situation. And in some emergencies, these are the only effective mode to deliver some medications. And when we sought legal opinion, we were advised that we were vulnerable under legislation, current legislation, if we didn't change it that way. The second reason is that some legislation upon which the AP was based has been changed and updated. So those were the 2 major reasons that we went after it. The features of the AP are that it stresses that the primary responsibility for the administration of prescription medication rests with the parent guardian wherever possible. The treatment regime should be outside of school. The second choice, the parents administer at school. And if this can't be accomplished, then staff can administer. And this is fairly typical in schools and under the previous AP. The forms attached are for staff administration of meds and also self-administration of meds, which is outlined. And both Form 1 and Form 2 require prescribing medical practitioners to outline the conditions for administration and to sign off. We worked with the law firm Miller Thompson throughout because there's a fair amount of legal exposure here, and we wanted to make sure that that our staff was protected and that the children that we're trying to help make sure that they're in school and enjoying the school experience, regardless of what their needs are. That was our emphasis, and we looked at APs and forms from coterminous board and other boards in the area. And we feel like we have a really good administrative procedure that'll work for both students and parents and staff.
Thank you. There's some comments or questions for you. Trustee Gerbans.
Thank you, Chair Amos. So I'm a little bit, as a parent of a student who requires an EpiPen, and has for many years, having to go and get a physician to fill out this form is kind of annoying. Do I have to do it yearly? Is it a one-time thing? Do I have to go to the specialist? Like it's, and actually my daughter does administer herself in the end, but yeah, it's, Do you have answers for those questions?
Yeah, through the chair to Trustee Krebenz, there is a fair amount of risk if we don't have parents to sign off, according to, and physicians to sign off, according to our legal advice, and that's why it was added there. And so that's the point of that. It is yearly. It's not. It doesn't have to be more often than that. So it shouldn't. We're hoping that it's not big hardship for parents, but it also makes sure that one of the provisions in it is that every fall it's updated so that we make sure that we have dosages and other side effects that may present due to it. Sometimes people change the meds, and if we don't make sure that we update on a regular basis, we could be acting in a way that's not appropriate for the meds prescribed. So it is for the protection of our staff and also for the students to make sure that whatever we do right. Yeah, go ahead.
I was just going to say that there may be pushback from physicians because suddenly when they've never had to sign, I've been getting these forms yearly and they've never had to be involved, and now suddenly we're going to be throwing thousands of students at them in September to fill out these forms, and there may be a fee involved.
That's a good heads up. So that's something that we can talk to our staff and our schools about letting folks know about the change ahead of time, because they'll have the whole summer ahead of time, because we'll be rolling this out for staff knowledge this spring, but starting it in the fall. So it gives us lots of lead time, so people aren't under huge pressure.
Director Miller.
And through you, Chair Amos, to Trustee Krebenz and Superintendent Pennyfather, it's just an editorial remark. I think it would be a shame if a physician charged a fee to sign these forms.
Thank you. Trustee Oliver.
Thank you, through your chair. I'm pleased to see that care has been taken to ensure that staff who will administer meds will receive some kind of appropriate training around that, particularly making sure that it's the right medication, the dose, frequency, and that sort of thing. So that's outlined in section 5.1. I still think it's important that the teacher or the person administering the medication actually ask the child to specify their name, whether they know them or not, and do that double check of name versus the name on the bottle, just to make sure there's no confusion around which student it is and no medication errors. And secondly, around the EpiPen use, I believe if an EpiPen is administered in an emergency situation, so during an anaphylactic attack, that upon administration 911 is to be called. So I just want to make sure that everybody understands that is outlined in the process.
Yep, that's outlined in the process, and then in this you'll see that it refers to different protocols. For example, the asthma protocol and the anaphylaxis protocol, and the steps you just referred to are outlined in those protocols. And they haven't changed other than a few minor things so that it agrees with this, but those things are there. The other thing is that especially with, this came up because we had 2 students in the board who had very acute needs, and we had to meet those needs, and part of what's involved there is defining a core team that does this, so they would know the student and would have training in those cases so that they do know who they're dealing with. So that's part of the training, and at the one school that's been trained so far, CCAC arranged for training. A nurse came in, and they actually have training models that they use with so that they understand really what they're going to be doing. So it is to make sure that those kids with real acute needs are safe and can attend school, which is the whole point of it, right?
Thank you, and I really appreciate that.
Thanks.
Thank you, Trustee Harvey Hope. Thank you. Through you to the presenter. So reading through it, there's a form that you need filled out to self-administer prescription meds. So that's Form 2. And this is going to be the same comment that I made about the concussion protocol when it came out, which is a parent takes a child and after hours to a clinic. The doctor prescribes a prescription, and it says 3 times a day, so there's a noon thing. And the child is, 15 and more than capable of swallowing an antibiotic type pill, and they forget to get the form filled out. And so it's one of those things where you have to make it front and center. The people know this form is there. As in, there's got to be something in the student verification forms at the beginning of the year that you basically say, here's a blank Form 2, have it in your back pocket, or have it someplace where you can find it, because the same thing with the percussion protocol where you have to have the doctor fill it out. You can't go back for a second visit to get the form filled out without costing you the money to fill out the form, but you can have them sign the form while you're there getting the prescription in the first place. And having gone through the concussion protocol one recently, that you have to have the form with you in order not to go through another step. So, and it's never occurred to me for a self-administered prescription for a high school student to even tell the school they're doing it. So, I mean, that's the other piece is, I guess, as long as the parent's fine with the kid will take it or not, the question is there now a requirement for parents to then say, yes, I've sent my child to school with prescription medication in their backpack? This is the part where, like, yes, I understand the covering it off if the teacher's involved or the office is involved, but have we made this more complicated?
Well, currently, if any in the current practice, if there's a medication to be administered by staff, forms have to be filled out. And with the people are getting in a pretty good habit with the concussion protocol. If we know about it at the school level, and the parents call because the child's bumped their head, they hand them that. That's pretty well practiced that they hand the parent that if they're going to take them to see a physician. So that's becoming more routine now as people get more comfortable with it, so that parents aren't, we don't want people inconvenienced. We'd like it to run as smoothly as possible for everyone involved. Was there another part to the question that I missed?
The secondary student who has prescribed, or for that matter, non-prescribed medication is self-administered.
Yeah, part of that is, it's one thing with a very much older student who can manage that, but often, and as it's outlined there, that there's there's sort of a hierarchy that it's best if parents do it outside of the day, but of course that doesn't work with a lot of medication, so it ends up happening during the school day, and then it becomes a working through with the administration at the high school level. And we had a case like this where it was that discussion about, well, they're off in this part of school and coming down to the office to get it. So can we teach your child to self-administer? And they went through that whole working through between the parent and the physician and the child, and they worked that out. But having had that discussion and knowing that that medication is in school, you would want it documented that this is going on.
Thank you, Director Miller.
Through your Chair, Amos, to trustees, don't forget this is an emergency procedure. This is not like standard. This is, and it's primarily focused on primary students. I mean, obviously there's incidents at the intermediate level and secondary schools, but this is the purpose of this is to address emergency situations as opposed to, you know, the prescribing of an antibiotic and those kinds of things. So, and in fact, the paragraph just says that the primary responsibility for the administration of prescription and or non-prescription medications to the student rests with the student's parents and or guardians. However, there may be circumstances, including where a medical condition requires the administration of a medication on an emergency basis. So this is what this is intended to talk about. So,
Thank you. Trustee Hajali.
Thank you so much. My comment is just in regards to what Trustee Romance was kind of touching on in terms of the difficulty in just getting a physician's sign-off and kind of the hassle in actually getting that. I work at a pharmacy, so I kind of know a little bit of detail on this. We, at a pharmacist has access to a patient's history and all the prescriptions that they do have, so they can see basically the changing in medicine. They have the kind of approval from the physician of what the medication that the patient is on, or in this case the student would be. So I was just thinking if it would be worthwhile to kind of look at, instead of a physician's signature, if we can also do a substitute for a pharmacist's signature, because they do have access to that file, and it is quite easier because usually families would kind of choose pharmacies that are located near to their house, and it's easily accessible. You don't have to book an appointment. It's kind of like a walk-in thing. They can just pull up the file in their system. So I just think it's worthwhile looking at it as a sort of substitute. So that's just kind of my...
Yeah, I mean, probably in 90% of the cases that would seem like a logical thing. The problem is that our legal advice is that would leave us vulnerable. And we also have to understand that we work in an environment with different unions that are very careful about advising their members about, you know, their level of risk. So we have to do what we have to do is make sure that there's a comfort level and a comfort level, and also that we don't expose anybody legally. The other thing is, with the the reason this came up was because there was a student who had really acute needs, and there's dialogue between that practitioner and the school to come up with the plan. So that's why in those cases it really is a must to have the doctor involved.
Thank you. I see no further questions on this topic, so thank you very much, Superintendent Pennyfather. Director Miller, do you have anything else under the administrative procedure update? All right, so we're now moving on to committee reports. Do we have any committee reports tonight? Trustee Collard.
Yes, I had some updates from the last OPSPA Board of Directors meeting. I can send them out via email to trustees. As I see, we're already approaching 10 o'clock, so I don't want to take up more time.
Thank you. So if you have any questions, please get back to Trustee Collard. Are there any other committee reports tonight? Seeing none? Yes, you do? Okay. You're not sure.
So for SEAC, there's some discussion about moving the April date, but it may be up in the air a little bit because it doesn't seem like a lot of people are available for that evening. So I don't know if there will be quorum. But just so you know, the date being discussed right now is April 11th. For Committee of the Whole, we may have some other plans for next week, so I can't comment on what our agenda will look like for next week until perhaps some items that come out during Director's Report. Thanks.
Thank you. And seeing no further committee reports, we will now go to the Director's Report. Director Miller.
Thank you, Chair Amos. I have 4 items tonight. The first one is with regard to the Burlington PAR process. The process, we were to bring a report March 29th to Committee of the Whole. and the intent was to make that public March 28th. We recognize the great challenge that this has been for the community, the great volume of work and data and information that has been produced as a result of this work, the public input into this work, and we believe that the timing of March 29th is too tight. And to be fair to the community, to be fair to our staff who will be writing this report, and in particular to be fair to the park, we are going to revise those timelines. And so I will list those timelines, and then we will send out a message to the entire community tomorrow, and we will tweet it out this evening. So here is the revised timelines. The director's final report will be posted publicly April 21st. It will then go to the Committee of the Whole on April the 26th. We will then have public delegation evenings on May 8th and May 11th. The director's final report will go to the board for its first reading, or for information, I guess, or for action, May 17th, and then it will go for decision on June 7th. So we've extended the time by about a month, so we can give this the full reflection that it requires, and so on. I'm open for questions. There's another part about this that I think I need to mention too. The Committee of the Whole, and we'll send out some details about that on April 26th, but it's our intention to live stream that Committee of the Whole. We don't normally live stream Committees of the Whole, but our intent is to do that evening. And the same with the delegation evenings. We will live stream those, and of course our board meetings are live streamed as well. We will provide the details of that to the trustees and the rest of the community through messaging at a later time. But the dates have changed now, and we'll get that messaging out as quickly as we can. And I know that it will be tweeted out by us this evening. So, any questions on that before I go to my next item on it?
Yes, there are a few comments or questions. Trustee Collard.
Thank you. Yes, I wish to thank Director Miller for extending the time frame for this. I think it's important for the community as well as for trustees. There's a huge amount of information for us to absorb, and I think the community as well as the committee need time in order to reflect on the options going forward. I also had another question regarding the PAR, but I didn't know if you were going to be touching upon the PAR further in your report, and if you are, I will hold off on my question.
Not at this point, no. I won't be touching on it again. So if you want, I know it's not trustees' comments and questions, but is it okay to ask now?
Well, I'd rather stay with what we're talking about, okay. And if there's other further to go through. Thank you. Trustee Reynolds.
Thank you. So one clarification that I would like to know, or I'm sure the community would like to know, is the Committee of the Whole meeting that will be live streamed on April 26th. Will there be an opportunity per our delegation policy to invite delegations from the community on that particular meeting?
I believe that we're going to dedicate the whole Committee of the Whole meeting to trustees' questions and comments, so there will be no opportunity for delegation on that night. Now, we are also aware there could be quite the crowd that would want to come, so I'd like to ask the director if he would consider having, as well as having it live streamed, if we could have a satellite location where people could go and watch it, and how we would deal with having the crowd here.
Can I respond to that? Yeah. Or I will respond to that. Yeah, we had what we're planning on doing, but of course we'll get those plans out, is to have a satellite school with some of our superintendents available, where it'll be live streamed. People, of course, could do it at home, watch it on live stream, but we would do it at a location at one of our schools as well, likely a school very close to this building, and so that it would be in there and we'd have some superintendents available. And we'd obviously have to limit the number of people that would be here. So we'll have to figure out that process as well, which we've got plans, but we haven't solidified them yet, so we'll do that. And we are likely to have a similar issue around the delegation evenings, where we'll have some plans for that too, that we can let people know. We know that this has aroused tremendous interest in the community, tremendous angst in the community and concern, and we want to honor that as best we can. But we also have to respect the process in terms of the Board of Trustees and how that process works in terms of the readings, Committee of the Whole, and the voting. So yes, those plans are in the works, and we'll get those out in plenty of time so people can see them. I think the initial thing is to get these dates out to the community. So,
Thank you. Trustee Pappen.
Thank you. Through the chair to Director Miller, I just wanted to echo my colleagues' sentiments about coming out with the changes in the dates. I know I personally appreciate it, and I'm sure most of the trustees appreciate it as well. And I'd also like to request a motion to proceed past 10 o'clock.
Thank you. I have a motion to extend past 10, seconded by Trustee Gerbentz. So, hold on a second, I'm holding on. Thank you for noticing, Trustee Pappen.
You're welcome.
Oh, okay, sorry. Nope, now it is. Okay, all those in favor?
In favor?
Yes. And that passes unanimously. Thank you. Is there any other comments or questions for the director around the change of dates for the park? Seeing none. You have any other items?
Yeah, I do. Sorry, one of those items was on my phone. That's why I was looking at it. The next item I want to talk is just mentioned. It's the Halton Skills Competition on Tuesday, March 28th. I hope trustees are able to attend, and the student trustees. It's at part of it's at Robert Bateman, and most of it's at White Oaks. And the dinner reception awards are at White Oaks in the evening. I don't, Superintendent Hunt-Gibbons or Trustee Metropolansky, since you attend White Oaks, do you guys have any comments about that?
I'm excited for it to come. I know that there's always a lot of students who come to this competition. I know at my school personally we have a great tech program, and lots of different schools have tech programs as well. It's a great competition.
And you will be joined by students not only from our board, but also from our coterminous board, as well as our own elementary schools.
And the last item I have is I want to turn to Superintendent Jackie Newton. In our multi-year plan, the trustees and board staff, but the trustees who we talked a lot about innovation and ingenuity and what we're trying to do, and we created a portfolio of Superintendent of Innovation, and Superintendent Jackie Newton wants to give you a brief on some of the work that we've been doing. And considering we've only been doing this for about 6 months, I think we're well on the way to being more innovative than we already were. In fact, much more than we already were.
Thank you through the chair and Director Miller. Thank you very much for the opportunity of creating this portfolio of innovation and ingenuity, and I appreciate the opportunity to share with you a few updates. I have provided you with an organizer in the JWS trustee group if you want to look at it later, but just to highlight very quickly, and I'll talk really quickly, so it'll go by. In August of 2017, we hosted the System Leadership Conference and Simon Sinek's book, The Why. And I think that's what we've been looking at in terms of why are we doing school the way we do? Why are we working as a corporation the way we do? We distributed over 400 books at that conference and really created a hashtag HDSB Innovates. So if you're a Twitter nut, 10 years old as of Wednesday was the first tweet that went out. You can follow along on some of the pieces that people have. And we also created 2 Google groups, one HDSB Leadership and Staff Development that Lori Reed created 2 years ago and is starting to get some good traction now in terms of people posting their ideas and sharing warts and successes. In addition, we have Director Miller challenged the senior team to read an hour a week. And sometimes you read and sometimes you Google up and sometimes you listen on audio. But we've been posting our books and readings and things that we'd like to share about innovation on there as well. We also then in September put out a challenge to administrators and teachers to hashtag observe me. And again, there's a whole article on, instead of waiting for you to be formally TPA'd or teacher performance appraisal or to be evaluated, that in fact come in any time, come and see what my kids are doing and come in and help me get better at my practice. In August, we also decided that we would define what innovation and ingenuity was, and basically it's not just cool, funky, and fun, and isn't that wow, but instead innovation means to improve either a process, a product, or an understanding of how we do learning in our organization. And through October through March, we hosted Halton Goes to the Movies. So we hosted Tony Wagner's Most Likely to Succeed, preparing our kids for the innovative era. This was a result because 4 members of the senior team went down to Texas to take a look at Tony Wagner's Deeper Learning, and 4 of us are going next week to San Diego to take a look at it in more depth. But 300 books were distributed on Tony's work. And in addition, we had 450 viewers through the month of October and November. And since then, 11 other schools, including 2 weeks ago, have hosted showings for their parents, their communities, and their students about how could we do school differently. And I think a number of you as trustees also went to those movie theater experiences to generate conversation. We've also been working with Gord Truffin in our innovation think tank with our ICT. Andrea and Rochelle are a part of that team as well. And so again, bringing people out to talk about what is innovation, what is technology, and what does pedagogy marry technology. We then have led a system leaders meeting to develop that understanding. In March, we've just launched a series of Sunday night meetups to think people would actually want to go online and look at a meetup with over 500 participants in the North America. 300 books were distributed to folks through Eventbrite here to read the book and then go on George Kouras's chat line about what is innovation. And so sometimes you're interested in the webinar and sometimes you're interested in the online chat that's going on about what are you doing in your school, classroom, or corporation. We also have looked at funding 2 particular projects we're really excited about through Tina Samani's group on program for ELL learners. So when they, English as a second language, come to register as a new student in our school system, they can now talk to somebody else, another student in another school in their own language, so they feel connected to Halton. So maybe you don't have another student in your own school right now that's speaking that language, but you can feel comfortable with that. And so Tina's been working really hard on that. We also set up 2 schools, a secondary and a elementary school in November. They agreed to launch a whole school Google G Suite. So everybody in the school will be well versed in classroom, Google Classroom, and their secretaries as well in terms of making Google Dance and how it works, and so that they can, again, it opens up more sharing and dialogue. So we'll see how those 2 schools do in terms of providing that piece. Associate Director David Bogue said, why don't you try reading David Price's book, Open? And his, so we did a book in an hour at the School Ops Retreat, as well as our recent admin council learning. And his analogy was soft, to share, to be open, to be free, and to trust. And so instead of buying a program to solve your problems, look at the room inside and share some of the thinking. We also looked at, we've launched positive learning spaces and environments, so we're going to be coming to you asking for a little bit of money in the next budget. Looking at creating a 90-day trial in 4 schools that are setting up different furniture to meet different learning needs in different zones. And we're setting up, and I've invited you as well as trustees, if you would like to be on any of the 8 sites to come and see in the next 90 days what that looks like. And the Furniture Think Tank from Julie Hunt Gibbons' team in school programs has really launched that in terms of let's think differently than ordering chairs and desks. But again, it's not just about the cool, funky furniture, but it is about how you move and be flexible and adaptable and change your pedagogy so that that meets students' needs. We then launched in February the Shift, which we talked a little bit about tonight, and we have 2 Shift bloggers right now that are running this, Jamie Mitchell and Matt Coleman, and over, as of Sunday night, 2,515 viewers. So people are interested in what's happening in our system. And then we just launched on Monday, Life as a Student for a Day. So you think you know what learning is like. So that's it's the hashtag Observe Them challenge. So follow a student around for a day, do their homework, have lunch with them, go to their basketball practice and see how tired you can be. And then write a blog about it and share it with the shifters. So we're interested in seeing how that goes. And then we're putting out a teaser on May 2nd for Second City to work with our hashtag HTSB Innovates on Are You Ready to Shift? So you're starting to shift your thinking, both corporate and non-teaching and teaching staff, if they're interested in coming up with some thinking, spending a day at the barn in Milton and looking at, and maybe some square dancing. Scott agreed to lead the hoedown, but really talking about how to improve a system, how to improve a process, a product, and understanding of how we might do things and continue things differently. Thank you very much, Mr. Miller.
All I can say is wow, and can you get some of us moving and we'd learn better, and yes, anyways.
Maybe standing at
lots of points would be good, yes. Go ahead.
I'm done. Thank you, Superintendent Newton.
I think the right person's got the portfolio right now.
Oh, my head's spinning.
Lots of exciting things happening in the system, that's for sure. So we're now up to the communications from the chair. I hope everybody enjoyed their March break. And now that we're back at it, and we'll be fully at it until the end of June, we've got lots of things coming up. But I know tomorrow, Trustee Harvey Hope and myself are going to 150 celebration for the at Oakville Trafalgar High School. They're doing a swearing-in ceremony for some new Canadians, and it'll be very exciting to watch. And Director Miller's there, and I believe a couple of the superintendents might be there as well. Yeah, Salmini and Gibbons will be there as well. So it'll be a great experience. And I think just the start of some of our 150 celebrations that are going to be going on in the system. Tomorrow evening is also Women as Career Coaches. Is there anyone besides myself who is going? Oh, Superintendent Newton's going. That's great. You're not going this year? Not? All right. Well, we'll represent everybody well. It's always a great evening. And next week, as the director said, the Halton Skills Competition is at White Oaks. And I know there's a couple of us who are judging, and we'll be there in the evening. And if you're not judging and you have the opportunity, please come out and just enjoy the day, because there's so many exciting things going on with the students in the system. And so please come on out. And I think that's it for next week. And we will have a committee of the whole meeting. We will have to reorganize it because it was going to be about the PAR. So stay tuned for that. And she's trying to juggle right now. So, and we are going to have to actually look at our budget process too for timing, because with some of these shifts, it's caused some shifts. So,
can I comment?
Go ahead.
So for the week after, or the 2 weeks after, or the April wealth. I think we had scheduled a day in the life of a principal and program locations, including IB, HP, SHISM, Extended French, Special Education. So as long as Director Miller is okay, because I know both of those presentations involve staff, that's what I would propose.
When were we going to do budget? I thought Day in the Life was
And there's a budget piece we can do in there as well.
on the 12th of April, budget workshop? Yeah. So March 29th, we haven't set yet. No, there was no budget workshop because we won't have the information.
No.
Right? I know it was. Okay.
But she's
Sounds like it requires
we
further
can make
conversation.
it work. Yeah, but we'll make whatever works.
Okay. She's asking if some of those presentations could be moved up to the next week.
Oh, so a day in the life of the principal. I'm looking at the people that are organizing that over there.
You're away.
Oh, I forgot. Okay, we'll talk and we'll get out the agenda.
We can find something else.
Okay.
Okay. And I believe that's all I have at the moment. Just trying to see if there's anything you need to be aware of coming up other than that. Not at the moment. So we're now up to trustee questions and comments. Trustee Collard.
Thank you. This is to Director Miller. On December the 9th, I attended the Community Hubs discussion that was hosted by MPP Eleanor McMahon, Leah Reynolds, Dom Ranzella, and you were also in attendance, although I recall you had to leave partway through. At that meeting, I asked about the possibility of coterminous boards working together to provide solutions to the community, especially in light of the PAR currently underway in Burlington. We were advised that this is exactly the type of partnership that the province would encourage. Shortly after that meeting, I spoke with Trustee Reynolds about the possibility of working with the Halton Catholic District School Board on a joint campus between Central and Assumption, and perhaps also Pearson, MM Robinson, and Notre Dame. My idea was to have both school boards operate from the same campus. Trustee Reynolds expanded on this by suggesting that students could attend at both HDSB and HCDSB campuses, thereby providing students with the breadth of program that they require and desire while keeping all campuses open. The proximity of the schools to each other would make this not only possible, but attractive. We met with you to discuss these ideas, and you agreed to approach the director of the HCDSB about the potential for a partnership that would serve all of the students in Burlington. Would you please share with trustees the outcome of your discussions with the director of the Halton Catholic District School Board?
Thank you for that question. Through you, Chair Amos, to Trustee Collard and all trustees. I did have that conversation. And the director of the HCDSB, based on the way funding happens and not figuring out how to reconcile how we could share students based on funding models, but was willing to speak to their chair. And at this time, it's not a consideration of theirs to work around shared students.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Trustee Al Harrison. It's you. Oh, thank you. You could talk about what you're going to do tomorrow. Go ahead.
Okay, thank you, Madam Chair. I just wanted to let everybody know that tomorrow is the culmination of a lot of work from the parent community and students in Southwest Oakville, culminating in the Rock Your Locks event, where approximately 75 to 80 people have signed up to have their hair cut and donated towards making wigs for people who are in cancer related treatment. So I'm excited to be a part of that, and I want to congratulate the parents, students, and thank the hairdressers who have stepped up to donate their services as well. Thanks.
And we'd like some before and after shots. Congratulations to you for participating. Trustee Harvey Hope.
Yes, the calendar scheduling seems to be getting a little tricky for trustees. Tuesday and Wednesday, I have a note that it says it's the band extravaganza, reading the news release that came out. Same day as Halton Skills. Yeah, but it's also band extravaganza. So my query was, for those of us who are trying to be in 5 places at once, could we perhaps get a schedule of when the masked band is getting together to play this really cool new piece, so that if we are trying to jump all over Halton, we might be able to pull it off. I've been trying to get to that band extravaganza every year. I think I made it once when it was in my own neighborhood, and I could get there on the way to the other activities. But so just a request. It is a week away, so I will take the information by email, but if we could get the information. And then also the skills, the same thing, the timing of the agenda day, so that if we did want to pop in and out, how that would work. Again, one year I drove to Georgetown, but so it all depends on what else we're doing.
I know skills is 9 to 3 with the presentations at about 5.
Okay, but see, the calendar event says 8:30 to 3:30 that Andrea set up. So again, the trustee calendar, if we don't have the details attached or the PDF attached, it's sometimes hard to go find the.
Thank you. Trustee Metropolinsky.
Thank you. I have a question about the literacy test and the board's involvement. So I've received a question from some students. I know that the literacy test is coming up for grade 10 students next week. I believe I was looking at my school calendar, and I think it's on the 26th. And some students just had questions about whether or not classes will be running, and if that's a decision that their own school makes, or if that's a decision that the board makes.
I will refer to Superintendent Hunt-Gibbons.
Thank you, through the chair, to our student trustee. Each school puts out their own emails, center mail, to their families and communicates to students about their schedule for the day. But it is a school day, and so all students are in school in some form that day. The literacy test is, if you recall when you wrote it, is 2 booklets and a total of 150 minutes. But then because of extended time for English language learners or students with learning needs, it can go to double the time. So the timetable for students looks different, and it doesn't look the same from school to school because each school has different facilities and has to utilize those in different ways. So you'll see something coming out from your principal on center mail around what that day looks like. In fact, earlier today, a message was sent out centrally from our communications department, reminding all families that this is a redo from our fall. Remember, we EQAO attempted this online in the fall and it didn't work very well. And this one, as such, is paper only. Unless someone has accommodations that are specific to the use of computers, those would be the only students who are using computers for this. Everyone else will be using pen and paper, the old-fashioned way, and the test will be going for, it's the 30th. It's a week tomorrow.
Thank you. Trustee Gray.
Thank you, through the chair, and thank you to Trustee Metropolinsky, because I had questions similar to that about the OSSLT, which has been answered. So thank you, Superintendent Hunt-Gibbons. I wanted to make note earlier today that trustees received a little bit of a nudge of information regarding the Halton Food for Thought breakfast fundraiser, and that's happening on May the 5th, and that info was shared today. And be sure to indicate to Susan Milson if you have the opportunity to attend. Also that I'm aware of at least 5 trustees who have already signed up for the fundraising HLF golf tournament being held on May 30. If you haven't signed up yet, please do so. And regarding the Halton Learning Foundation, I wanted to make note that they have been nominated for the 2nd year in a row as a finalist to receive a Burlington Business Award. The gala that will at which this determination of which organization might receive this award is scheduled for early April. In fact, April the 6th. And so everyone is very, very hopeful and keeping their fingers crossed that the HLF will receive its due recognition. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Trustee Pappen.
Thank you. Through the chair, I just wanted to make you aware that yesterday was the International Day of the Elimination of Racial Discrimination. On that day in 1960, police opened fire and killed 69 people at a peaceful demonstration in Sharpeville, South Africa, against the apartheid bylaws. Proclaiming the day in 1966, the United Nations General Assembly called on the international community to redouble its efforts to eliminate all forms of racial discrimination. March 21st is also recognized as World Down Syndrome Day. On this day, people with Down syndrome and those who work and live with them throughout the world organize and participate in activities and events to raise awareness and create a single global voice for advocating for the rights, inclusion, and well-being of people with Down syndrome. And a little closer to home, Pauline Johnson School enjoyed their Literacy Week, which ran from March the 6th to March the 9th. The staff planned and organized an engaging week of activities which highlighted different aspects of literacy for their students. This was to be a community-building event, so it was topped off with a cross-grade Tribes Literacy Day. It was a great way to highlight literacy and also build community among their students and staff. The grade 5 and 6 students were the tribe leaders, and they demonstrated their excellent leadership skills and were caring role models for the younger students. A coyote awareness presentation took place at Ryerson School on March the 9th. A presenter from Oakville Green came to share knowledge and actions for the students to be aware of in the event that they may be confronted by a coyote in their community. This was a great learning opportunity as well. Many communities in Halton are dealing with coyotes in their schoolyards and playgrounds, and I thought this was an excellent way to inform students and parents of how to deal with these situations. And personally, tomorrow I will be leaving for Denver, Colorado to attend the National School Board Association conference from March 25th to the 27th. And I hope to bring back lots of information and also find out that Halton District School Board is a very well-run board. Thank you very much.
Thank you. We look forward to hearing about it when you get back, too. Trustee Reynolds.
Thank you. I have two items to share. Just would like to add on to Trustee Gray's comment about the Burlington Business Awards. The Center for Skills Development and Training is also in the running against HLF. So, Halton District School Board is well, I think, represented there. So hopefully someone will bring home an award. The other piece that I would like to talk about is regarding the PAR. As you know, trustees are outside the PAR process, and not all trustees have been able to attend the PAR meeting nights, nor are they expected to do so. But I thought I'd bring some awareness to the table about the concerns about the PAR process, because you may not have been listening, or you may not get letters on this regard. And I will be circulating to you tonight some letters from 5 different sources and voices, particularly from the community, members of the community who had actually sent letters to the Ministry of Education about the PAR process, letters from the Association of Municipalities of Ontario, a non-partisan group, the Rural Association, Ontario Association of Municipalities, and other various community members who are living outside of the, sort of living in the Burlington community outside of the community that I represent. I think what's important here is that what I've learned is that there are some common themes of concerns from the community. People feel that our PAR process has not included certain communities, the 7-8 elementary communities, that they lament that the trustee consultative role has been diminished in this full participation of the PAR, that there's concerns about the quality control on our data, on facility renewal costs, and there's also concern that projection data that is expected from Statistics Canada, which will be coming out late in May, is also not in duly informing this process. I raise these concerns because I think it speaks to the confidence and trust in our process, and I think it's important that we are, as a group, committed to review this process and evaluate it, its intent as reflected at some time in the near future. Thank you.
Thank you. Trustee Oliver.
Thank you, through you, Chair. I would like to revisit a comment and some suggestions I had made around our order paper presentation and I guess tracking. One thing that came to my mind is that a lot of the motions were made prior to our time with the board, and so often, you know, it's a historical piece, but sometimes things get revisited and new motions are made and reports come forward with recommendations that then change what's been or alter what had been done in the past. And it would be, I think, a helpful tool to be able to have a searchable database where the motions and reports could be easily found and where we could search for motions or reports or issues by keywords, and that would help us to navigate the historical pieces, the current pieces, and link them together. Another recommendation would be to add another, I guess, a fourth column to this table with a heading, I recognize this needs a little bit more thought, but it could be something like related items or amendments made, where we could make a link to a new motion or action, just to tie things together a little bit better for us and, you know, for the future. So I'm not sure where that discussion can happen and how to make this happen, if people agree, but I think this, I'd like to bring it forward for a little bit of discussion.
Maybe that could be a discussion at Committee of the Whole when we want to look at looking at what our processes are and how we document them.
At first blush, we think it's a ton of work, so I think that's a good suggestion to take it to Committee of the Whole.
I do recognize there would be a lot of work involved, and I'm thinking that this could make an excellent student project for co-op students or post-secondary students.
Well, I guess we'd have to have the discussion first whether we want as a group to go forward and the amount of time and potential costs that might be involved. Thank you. And seeing no further trustee comments and questions, we do need to go back, rise into private. So can I have a motion to rise into private? Trustee Gerbent, seconded by Trustee Gray. All those in favor?
In favor?
Okay. That passes unanimously. We will start in like 2 minutes, so don't go anywhere.
Kim, I gotta let